Sam sat in the streamlined black cockpit of the slick steel breech ship. He ran his hands over the steering guides at the end of his handrests. He smiled to himself. Sam listened as Orbit ran through the checks in his earcoms. Atmosphere is nominal, the AI said. Neutronium levels stable. Fields online, stable. Sam, go ahead and test the grav holds. Sam nodded and motioned the steering sticks back and forth. He felt the tug of the launch tube's grav field as it held him firm in place. Grav hold stable and holding. Orbit ran through a list of unspoken digital checks before announcing, My crystal core is sound. Shielding is holding. Ambient radiation nominal. Outer hull radiation standard. Orbit started checking the vitals of the ship's 2 inhabitants. Sam, your blood pressure is elevated. You feeling all right? Sam sat staring at the monitor displaying the rear hold. He watched the motionless Fubarian, mounted in its designated tube. Just looking over my wingman, he said. Orbit appeared on the holomonitor beside Sam. It has proven itself, Sam. It's peaceful, and you need it to make this ship operational. Orbit stared at him. You okay with this? Sam ran a finger along the scar at his side. You think it remembers me? Orbit shook his head. Not at all. That isn't even the one you fought. Sam looked away from the Fubarian over to Orbit. Callie could have given it memories. She could have it purposefully wreck this project. Orbit shook his head. Doubtful. Only one way to find out, though. Sam laughed. If you say so. You ready? Orbit nodded. Sam flipped the switch, activating the communal comm channel. Breach ship ready. Checks complete. You are clear for trial run breach. Carrier ready, Pouch Cheek replied. Sam moved the steer sticks forward slightly, causing the gravity drives to start pushing. Nova spoke over the comm. Releasing holds in 3, 2, and 1. Sam didn't feel anything, his gravity stable, but his view screen abruptly changed. The lights of the launch tube disappeared, replaced by the star-dotted blackness of the void. Red reticules started popping up on the screen. Sam moved his thumb over the steer stick, causing the cursor to move on the screen. Locking on to grav points. He selected a set of 6, and the grav drives caught hold. The ship slowed and spun around. Sam smiled as he looked over the carrier. Successful so far, he said. The engines are holding quite well. I will have to congratulate Spitzlittle on the improvements, Orbit replied. Sam spoke over the open channel. So far so good. We're going to spiral around you a few times. Prepare a plasma burst. I'm thinking maybe the 4th lap if all holds. Preparing a high-band spectral burst, Pouch Cheek replied. Sam pushed slightly with the right, causing the breech to pivot and aim away from the carrier. Once sighted in, he started forward slowly, and then sped up. Orbit, how is the hold? Orbit checked the numbers. Main hold is on the carrier, holding firm. Orbital tethered. Spiral is within tolerances. Sam watched the monitor as the ship flew in a circle around the carrier. He lapped around it, and then continued 3 more times. Is the burst ready? Test burst is ready, Pouch Cheek said. We will continue on course. Fire when ready, Sam replied. He kept the ship on course, watching. A burst of light skewed the viewer optics. Orbit adjusted them within moments. Orbit appeared on screen, along with several bar graphs. He looked at Sam. We are flying through the radiation burst now. Levels are concurrent with a Sol-sized star at a mercurial distance. Sam watched the graph. How is the skin holding up? Skin is fine. It absorbed the radiation as advertised. Sam looked over at the monitor displaying the Fubarian. The creature was gyrating back and forth in its tank. He looked back at Orbit. What's it doing? Is it supposed to be doing that? Orbit nodded. The Rima is watching as well. She is sending a live stream missive. She says it is just enjoying its meal. Sam nodded slowly to himself. So it can feed from the radiation outside. Orbit reached from one screen into the other, zooming in on the tubes attached to the life tube of the Fubarian. The slick steel coating is its skin, Sam. Callie figured out how to get it to graft to the outside. I told you this. Sam forced his mechanical lungs to purposefully sigh. I've been busy. Orbit laughed. I can display a replay of me telling you if you don't believe me. Sam shook his head. I believe you. You probably told me. He looked over the Fubarian. So, it's okay. Yeah, Orbit said. The skin is soaking it up just fine. No damage sensed. Turn it up then, Sam said. Pouch Cheek quickly replied. Preparing next burst, increasing luminosity to pistol star levels. Fire when ready, Sam said. Sam watched as the graphs rose up significantly. Any issues? He asked. Orbit shook his head. No, none so far. It seems to be working brilliantly. Sam looked down at his hands. Any increase of radiation inside? None at all, Orbit replied. All right then. Give us all you got, Pouch. You sure, Sam? I can hold a quasal output for a few seconds. You want that? Sam looked at the holo camera and nodded. We have to test it out. Firing in 3, 2. She paused. And 1. The breach shook as the beam hit it. It continued its trajectory around the carrier, soaking in the volley, bouncing as it was pummeled. Inside, Sam shook slightly as the interior grav plating compensated. He watched as the ship's Fubarian swelled. Tiny beads of purple light glowed on its body. Orbit. It's supposed to be glowing? Orbit calculated for a moment, then shook his head. Ease off, Pouch Cheek. We're hitting threshold. The beam dissipated. Test over. Are you all right? Orbit shook his head. No, I think we need to come in. Have Rima and the air made ready. The Fubarian is displaying curious symptoms. Bay is opening up. Hurry back in, Pouch Cheek said. Teams are at the ready. Sam retargeted the carrier and piloted his ship in. Sam successfully docked and made it to the access port. The outer skin parted and the door opened. As he descended down the ramp, he was greeted by Marion and Etta, the effigies of Orbit. Marion walked up to him. Hey, good flight, she said. Not really. If that thing overloads from a quasar burst, how's it going to make it through the rift core? Sam replied. Etta walked up beside them as they started down the inner halls of the ship. The data that the Rima has shared is showing this might be normal. It's still young, growing. It might just be full. Marion nodded. Exactly. Teams are en route anyway to check it out. Sam looked back and forth at them. It's weird. You two are the same person, but you're having a conversation. The two living puppets bobbed their heads in agreement and spoke in unison. We're conversing for your sake, keeping you informed. Would you prefer us to talk like this? Sam shook his head. No, I appreciate what you do. Disregard. He led the three into his cabin. He was already pouring a drink as the door slid shut. Marion noted the locking mechanism click into place. Etta nodded and stepped close to Sam. Sam, there's an issue. Sam looked over his shoulder at her. Issue? Yeah, I know. Purple spots on the creature that was supposed to get me into the core. Etta shook her head. Not that. That's a non-concern at the moment. What then? Sam asked. Jet escaped prison. He might have been gravely injured during the attempt also. Sam lifted his drink up toward his mouth. What kind of injured? Abdominal strike. Blood loss. Sam nodded and took a sip. Not my problem. Fuck that guy. Marion, standing next to the door, shook her head. No, it is our problem. You guaranteed his safety. Rima might pull out of the deal over this. Pull out the Fubarian. This could be a project over. Sam touched his earcom. Nova, you there? I'm here. What do you need, Sam? Nova answered. Has Rima received any transmissions from Outsystem recently? Yes, she did a minute before your retubing of the breach vessel. Do you need to speak with her? Sam thought for a moment. I might. What is she doing now? Curious enough, Nova Core said. She is showing to be on approach to your cabin presently. Marion and Etta looked at each other. They turned their heads and stared at Sam. Sam walked toward the door. Thank you, Nova, he said, and clicked off the channel. Marion touched the door and stepped out of the way, allowing it to open to Rima, Victoria, and Fufang standing on the other side. Sam stared at the green woman. I just heard. Rima met his gaze. You're shit at keeping deals, Sam. Sam lifted the glass and took a sip of whiskey. He lowered it back down slowly. Nothing new there. I keep letting you down. Rima looked at Victoria with a side glance, and then back at Sam. Their fingers had touched for a moment. Rima took a deep breath. We need to rebroker our deal. I'm amazed you're still interested in it. I admit, I am curious, but mostly I want my people, my ship, an air of liberation. We deserve to be a part of your Clouder. We deserve to be free. You are going to sign paperwork to this regard. Make it legitimate. My crew, my ship, members of your people. Or what? Sam asked. She stared back at him. Or we all leave. We will find other paths for our freedom. Sam looked down and swirled the drink in the glass. Your son is running from the law. I could still motivate the pursuers one way or another. Fu Fang reached up and touched the Rima's hand. The green woman's eyes narrowed at Sam. Your pursuers have already failed, Sam. Jet's craft slipped past all your defenses, your guns, your hunters, and is back home with the mother. He's going to be fine, thanks for asking. Well, shit. Guess that's good for you. Sam turned and went back into his cabin, sitting down in his comfy chair. Rima looked at her two attendants and stepped inside. She walked across the cabin and sat on the couch. She lifted her feet up and put them on the glass coffee table. Sam looked over at her. The Callie doesn't really hate you. She should, Sam replied. No, she shouldn't. We know what we are. We know what Jet has done, and what Callie has done. We had our reasons, but people did get hurt. We get that. We get why you've done what you've done too. Sam shook his head. I sent her to that planet, funded the whole stupid project. Yes, you did, but we didn't suffer from it. She sat her feet down and leaned closer to him. We grew from it. Marion and Etta stood watching, waiting in case she tried to touch Sam. Sam took another drink from the glass. You really just want in the Clouder? The Rima nodded. I do. The mother is content in her system. I, however, was born to make a home elsewhere. I don't want you to be enemies with me when I do. And you'll still have the Fuborian help me? She nodded. Is it okay? She nodded. Think of it like reflux, bit of back bile in its system. I don't think it will hold up against the rift core. Not like that, Sam said. Marion stepped closer to Sam. Actually, Sam, that burst was mirroring a quasar load. The rift, albeit more active, isn't anywhere near as focused as that. The levels around the core should be well within tolerance for the Fubarian. Sam smiled at that, then looked over at the Rima. I'll sign it. Provisionary, of course. And you will need droid oversight. Rima Dekali smiled back at him. Of course. She stood up and started toward the door. Hurry up and finish your drink, Sam. You got agreements to sign, and a ship to pilot. Spitzlittle and the Preserver met Sam when he re-entered into the breach vessel. He stood in the door smiling at them. What are you two doing? Spitzlittle turned and looked up from the controls. I was doing one last look over. I don't want you detonating unexpectedly. Sam looked over at the Preserver. And you? The Preserver reached over with a scanner and took a quick download of Sam. Precautions if things go south. He focused his 3 eyes on the scanner, fiddling with the buttons. It misread. Here, let me do another. He reached up and swiped it back across Sam's face. There, got a good one. The Preserver cantered around Sam. I hope you don't blow up. Good luck, Sam, he said as he went down the ramp. Sam waved back. Thanks. He turned back to Spitzlittle. Well, we in rift space yet? Spitzlittle nodded. The carrier has been in for a few minutes. We should be near the storm in a few hours. Sam looked around the ship, touching the panels. She looked up at him. Are you nervous? He nodded. Yeah, I am. There's not telling what's on the other side. She walked over and sat in the pilot's chair. The market odds are that you're going to blow up. Yeah, I saw that this morning. He looked down at her. What did you bet on? She bobbed her ears a bit. I bet on you making first contact with a new interdimensional species. She looked up at him, forcing a sharp-toothed smile. I've had the dreams for a long time too, Sam. I think it's there. He put a hand on her shoulder. She reached up with all 4 hands and clasped them on his. I don't know why it would go to all this trouble if it didn't think it would work too. He shut his eyes for a moment. That's the thing. We don't know if it is trouble for it. It could be an immature mind just dicking around. It might get off on people like me smashing against the rift. From what I felt and can remember, it isn't stupid, Sam. It's been calling for someone to come meet it. She started to get out of the seat. You and Orbit need to go through your checks again. Sam helped her out and took her place. Yeah, we're getting close enough. She stood next to the chair. I still can't believe you signed that deal with Rima. He looked up at her. She's not her mother. She doesn't have to pay for her crimes. Spitzlittle dropped her hands from the chair and started toward the door. She's as much her mother as those 2 synthetics you like are, Orbit. She looked around the cockpit. And I know you can hear me, Orbit. Orbit appeared next her in his glowing purple boy form. Then you acknowledge she communicates heavily with her mother, yet has a distinctive personality and identity. Spitzlittle ran her right hands through the hologram. If any of your droids went haywire, I'd have you checked out too. Know that. Each are parts of the whole. Orbit and Sam watched as she exited out the hole and down the ramp. Orbit turned and looked at Sam. If a box spider malfunctions, the focus should be on the box spider until evidence suggests it could be something else. Sam waved at Orbit. Come on, let's get through our checks. We'll be nearing the central storm soon. Orbit vanished, focusing his processes to rerunning checks. The carrier had a thicker hull than most ships, being built exclusively for getting close to the central storm. Pouchcheek sat in the helm room with 24 other sapients, each monitoring and adjusting the ship as needed. Novacor, in his Infinigan android body, stood next to Pouchcheek. He put his hand on the railing next to the holoprojection. Bands of energy pulsed out from the center towards the ship. He looked over at Pouchcheek, holding up well so far. Pretty nice piece of engineering. She looked up at him, tilting her head. We are within proximity. Initiate status checks. She watched as Fuimos at their consoles activated their yellow lights. One of her Kratos security guards activated the yellow light at his station. She looked over at the light for the engineers down near the engines. It turned yellow. She looked over at the monitor at her left. Sam, you have the all yellow? Clear for departure when you are ready. She watched as he and Orbit went over some checks. The door to the helm opened behind her, and she turned and looked. The Rima and her consort had stepped in. Rima walked over to Pouchcheek. How is he? He's finishing up final checks. Rima looked over Pouchcheek's shoulder at Sam. He had his eyes closed and hands on the steering sticks. Is he okay? Marion stepped out from the corner of the room. He's nervous, as he should be. Rima continued looking at Sam. He's scared. Marion nodded. As he should be. Then Sam opened his eyes. Pouch, I'm ready. Here we go. Pouchcheek bobbed her ears. Good luck, Sam. You're clear for exit. Sam's chest hummed as he breathed harder. Everyone in the helm was listening and watched as the breach vessel exited out its launch tube into the storm. The holoprojector zoomed in as Nova isolated and focused on Sam. The black dot was assaulted by several rotating waves of energy. It darted through them like an arrow launched through the cresting surf. Pouchcheek clenched her armrests as she watched him near the storm's outer shell. The purple currents lunged out, launching electrical arcs bigger than gas giants. The breach ship took a bolt directly, and still carried its momentum into the purple clouds. Then he was gone into the storm. Pouchcheek looked at Nova. Nova looked back. Telemetry gone. How long till we know the outcome? She asked. Nova shrugged. Few minutes? Days? Decades? Who knows? Pouchcheek stood up and looked around the helm. All hands. Everyone looked up at her. All hands, she continued. Today we watched as Sam followed his dream and crossed over that event horizon in the name of science. I want a beacon launched here monitoring this location. We will remain in fixed orbit for 2 days, and then we will head home if he doesn't come out. She looked over at Marion. Marion nodded back at her and then started toward the door.